The station drifted like a forgotten thought above the pale gas giant, its hull catching the dim, cold light of the outer sun. It was quiet here, quiet in a way that made sounds feel guilty for existing. Jules Wren liked it that way. Silence made room for wires to hum, valves to click, for the station to whisper its language of pressure and data and idle cooling systems. Humans were loud, people worse. People filled silences like they were afraid of what they'd hear if they didn't. Jules, meanwhile, found deep, almost spiritual peace in the hiss of a CO2 filter cleaning its throat. He adjusted the grip on his spanner and peered behind a relay panel, the kind most engineers avoided because it was half a meter too narrow for any comfortable body position. A little trickle of lubricant crept down his sleeve. Perfect. Right where it shouldn't be. He sighed, twisted his arm with practiced dislocation, and yanked out a corroded thermofuse. It sparked a little, like a tiny mechanical protest. Jules muttered an apology. He'd apologize to the coffee machine too, if it looked offended enough. Up the corridor, the docking alert chimed once, twice, then fell into a soft series of pulses. Incoming vessel. Diplomatic, which meant new people. Possibly new protocols. Definitely new reasons for people to ask him why he always brought 2 coffees to the lab and drank both himself. He pulled himself out from under the panel, wiped a streak of whatever it was across his jumpsuit thigh, and wandered toward the observation strip where the ship would dock. Not because he was curious. Just because the backup coolant pump was on that side, and he hadn't pretended to inspect it in a while. The incoming vessel, sleek, silver, shaped more like a ripple in water than a ship, floated into its cradle without a sound. No rattling thrusters, no docking clamps grinding. It was graceful. Too graceful. Jules felt instantly betrayed by his own ship's wheezy airlock. 3 Nayari stepped out first, tall and dressed in fabrics that shimmered like glass under low gravity. Their movements were slow and musical, as if they'd rehearsed arrival choreography. Then came the 4th. She was quiet, shorter than the others, dressed simply. But it was her eyes that made Jules forget what year it was. They were dark, not just in color, but in depth. Like maybe if you looked too long, you'd fall into them and start reciting your deepest regrets. She moved her head slowly, scanning the room, and then her gaze passed over Jules. He froze. She didn't smile, just noted him, like a variable in a math problem. Her ears were long, curved like crescents, peeking through straight black hair. The only physical marker that said alien instead of intimidatingly elegant human woman who definitely reads minds. Jules immediately hated his own haircut. He panicked. Not because of her, but because she looked exactly like the sort of person you shouldn't panic around. He glanced away quickly, tried to look casual by leaning against a console, and promptly missed. His shoulder hit a switch that darkened half the corridor. Someone coughed. He pretended to read a diagnostic report that was actually a vending machine menu. Later, back in his quarters, which doubled as the emergency coolant overflow closet, Jules pulled up the station manifest and found her name. Ayla Invasa. Nyari, specialist in xenolinguistic resonance studies, which meant, as far as he could tell, she probably did unspeakable things to grammar and made computers blush. He stared at her ID photo, which did her approximately 0 justice, and then slammed the tablet shut. He didn't sleep much that night. His brain insisted on imagining situations in which he accidentally bumped into her, said something witty, and was rewarded with either a nod of amused approval or her calling security. In none of these scenarios did he come off looking like a mature adult. The next morning he woke early, told the coffee machine it was his only friend, and made his way to Lab 3B where a recent batch of solar inversion readings needed analysis. That was his excuse anyway. Lab 3B happened to be 3 doors down from the diplomatic research suites. She was there again, walking slowly, reading something from a wrist pad that projected soft Nyari glyphs into the air. Jules ducked behind a support beam, fully intending to reroute and find literally any other task in another galaxy. But then she stopped, looked around, and, of course, walked directly toward where he was hiding. He tried to straighten up. Failed. knocked his wrench onto the floor, where it clanged so loud it registered as a small meteor impact. She peered around the corner, one eyebrow raised. "Are you performing maintenance on the floor?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Yes, this tile's been squeaky. It's zero gravity flooring." "Right, that's why it's so suspicious," he said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not judgmental exactly. More like she was trying to determine if he was joking, broken, or both. Jules swallowed, reached down for the wrench, and realized too late that he had been muttering to himself while doing so. A quiet whisper, barely audible, meant only for him. "She's so beautiful. I wonder if she'd marry me." Silence. A breath. Then, "What did you say?" He blinked up at her. "What?" She tilted her head, those crescent moon ears flicking in a way that made his heart do something unfortunate. "You whispered something. I heard it." "Oh no, that was a joke. A joke whisper. Very popular on Earth." Her eyes didn't blink. "You whispered that I am beautiful. Objectively, scientifically speaking, like efficient symmetry, Euclidean ratios. No personal opinions involved, just math." She said nothing. Then very slowly she crouched down to his level. Her eyes studied him, calm and unblinking. "You also wondered," she said, "if I would marry you." He let out a strangled laugh. "Did I say that? Ha ha. Must have been someone else." "I am the only Nyari on the station," she replied. "Well," Jules said, standing up and backing into the wall, "that narrows it down." She stood too. "In my culture, whispered words carry intention. We hear them when they are real." He stared at her. She stared back. And then, she smiled. Just a little. Just enough for it to be dangerous. Jules stood frozen as she turned and walked away, her voice trailing like vapor. "Perhaps," she said, "I will listen more closely from now on." Jules considered for a few moments after she walked away the possibility of ejecting himself out of the nearest airlock. It was an irrational impulse, dramatic, logistically implausible, and against station regulation, but it did present certain emotional conveniences. Out there, drifting alone in vacuum, he could at least escape the knowledge that an alien woman had heard him whisper something he barely even admitted to himself. Also, out there, he wouldn't have to explain any of it during Tuesday's cross-cultural sensitivity workshop. He returned to Lab 3B pretending the previous encounter had been a fever dream, which was difficult, given that his wrist monitor had recorded a stress spike so dramatic it had automatically recommended lavender tea and light meditation. The station AI, Nora, greeted him with her usual bluntness. "You are perspiring." "That's how you know I'm alive," Jules muttered, wiping his forehead. "You whispered a marriage proposal to a Nyari dignitary. Your vitals are consistent with shame, panic, and several forms of social paralysis. I don't recall authorizing you to track my vitals." "You did, while attempting to program me to ignore you for 3 days. You failed, spectacularly." Jules groaned and shoved himself into the nearest chair, which immediately spun him around due to a loose stabilizer. He didn't resist. Let the chair do what it wanted. The universe was already laughing at him. He might as well lean into it. The lab lights dimmed briefly as Nora rebalanced power. A soft pulse of Nyari glyphs passed through the holoprojector, probably an update from the diplomatic science team. Jules noticed Ayla's name in the stream. Apparently, she'd requested access to resonance field archives, specifically those linked to early human vocal emotion recordings. That meant she was studying language tone, subtext, the kind of things humans use when trying to avoid being understood directly. Jules felt that information gnawed his nerves. At lunchtime, an arbitrary designation as the station ran on rotation-based time units, he made the mistake of entering the mess hall at the exact moment Ayla was pouring herself something green and unidentifiable. Their eyes met. He hesitated. She nodded once, calmly, like someone greeting a weather pattern. He gave her a weak smile and pretended to need more cutlery. He picked up 3 identical forks. She walked past him, silent, graceful, terrifying. She sat at the far corner of the room, facing the viewport, alone. Jules, after a full minute of arguing with himself about the location of his spine, chose a table not directly next to her, but not entirely across the room either. It was a coward's compromise. He set his tray down, then noticed he had taken only dessert cubes. 6 of them, bright purple, supposedly berry flavor. It was unclear what kind of berry, possibly an alien one that burned through socks. Ayla's voice carried across the room, soft but perfectly clear. I believe humans do not typically eat 6 desserts in a single meal. Jules cleared his throat. We do when we're celebrating. Are you celebrating? He hesitated. I'm celebrating the survival of my ego. It was injured earlier. Thought it could use some sugar. She turned her head slightly, smiling without looking at him. It is a curious thing. Your whispers were more honest than your words. Jules opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Most of my words are pre-scrambled, like eggs. She stood slowly, carried her tray, containing only that green stuff and some kind of protein square, and sat across from him. No announcement, no warning, just decisive, silent movement. He sat very still, like a prey animal trying to outwit a predator with a PhD. I've been reviewing early human music, she said. Apparently there is a tradition called serenade, a melodic performance intended to convey romantic intent. Jules choked slightly on his dessert cube. Yes, that's correct, sometimes accompanied by a guitar or a boombox over the head. She nodded solemn. I have no boombox, but I would be interested in understanding the emotional purpose of serenade further. I don't actually recommend trying it without, practice, or training, or interest. I am interested in serenades? In human emotional vulnerability as expressed through awkward gestures, she said. It is very efficient. Jules blinked. That's not the word we usually go with. There was a long pause. She sipped from her green beverage. He ate another dessert cube purely out of nervous obligation. It tasted like regret and artificial plum. Finally, she said, Do you fear me? Jules blinked again. What? No, I do. Well, not fear, more like respect, with a dash of chronic social dysfunction. Ayla tilted her head, studying him. You make humor as a shield. That is not uncommon, but inefficient. It's not about efficiency, he said, then paused. Okay, fine, it is. I've spent my entire life using humor to deflect feelings I don't understand. I once cracked a joke during a fire drill. The safety officer did not appreciate it. Ayla's expression didn't change. Then surprisingly, she laughed. Just a little. A quiet sound, precise and measured, like someone had explained laughter to her and she was trying it out for the first time. You are curious, she said, and not merely because of your whispered intentions. Right, Jules mumbled. About that, look, I didn't mean to. You did not expect me to hear. Exactly. But I did. I've noticed. She leaned forward. Nyari can sense language beneath language. It is part of our evolutionary path. We do not hear thoughts exactly, but intent, emotion attached to private speech. When you whispered, you were not joking. No, Jules admitted quietly. I wasn't. There was another long silence. This one didn't feel heavy, just suspended, like the moment between 2 musical notes. Finally, Ayla stood. She picked up her tray. Then I will consider the matter of marriage, she said calmly. Jules nearly fell out of his chair. Wait, you'll what? It is a serious concept in your culture, she said, walking away. I will evaluate its relevance. You may be informed of my findings at a later date. She disappeared down the corridor, her voice trailing back like static on a warm radio. And next time, consider whispering something more specific. Jules sat there, staring into the void of his berry cubes. Then he muttered, Okay, but now I'm afraid to whisper anything at all. The station AI, Nora, replied over his earpiece. Then may I suggest practicing complete silence? Statistically, your odds of further embarrassment will decrease by approximately 72%. Jules groaned. You're enjoying this? Immensely, Nora said. 2 days passed. during which Jules made a valiant and almost convincing effort to avoid all corridors, rooms, or ventilation shafts that might overlap with Alan Vass's presence. This strategy resulted in him discovering 3 maintenance ducts he hadn't known existed, one of which contained a mouse-sized robot that seemed deeply offended by the intrusion and hurled a nut bolt at him before retreating into the wall. He named it Clarence and decided to leave it in peace, as he now deeply related to its worldview. Nora, the station AI, eventually intervened during his 4th straight hour inside an auxiliary relay chamber. "You are not assigned to this location. I'm inspecting thermal regulators. They were replaced yesterday. I'm performing a follow-up. You are hiding from the Nyari diplomat." "Correction," Jules muttered. "I am tactically repositioning to avoid further intercultural escalations." There was a pause, then a humming sound in the walls, Nora's version of a sigh. "She has requested your assistance." Jules froze. "She what?" Alan Vasa submitted a formal request for human technical cooperation in resonance field diagnostics. The request includes your name, specifically, twice. That can't be right. Shall I read the file to you? Number, absolutely not. I believe you. There was a long silence in the chamber, a low hum, the occasional blink of a status light. Somewhere, Clarence dropped another nut bolt for emphasis. Finally, Jules stood, dusted off his jumpsuit, and muttered, "This is how it begins. First resonance diagnostics, then I'm adopting alien customs, then I'm writing Nyari poetry in my spare time, and nobody understands me anymore." "You never spoke much to begin with," Nora said. "Thank you, Nora. Your emotional support is as warm as a cryo valve." "You're welcome." He made his way through the station with the hesitant tread of a man approaching a wild animal holding a clipboard. The research annex where Ayla was working had been transformed. The walls glowed softly with Nyari sigils, floating layers of translucent data spirals and harmonic threads, dancing in the air like bioluminescent ribbons. The room hummed, not with machines but with resonance, low musical pulses like a living cello. She stood at the center of it, hands folded behind her back, her head tilted ever so slightly as if listening to something far away. When she saw him, she didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She nodded. "You came." "I had no choice. The AI threatened to release my browser history." Her eyes blinked slowly. "Is that significant?" "Only in the most mortifying ways." She gestured toward a glowing panel where Nyari script shifted into a crude translation matrix. "I need human auditory feedback for these readings. The frequency distortions are unreadable to our internal harmonics." Jules peered at the panel. "That's a fancy way of saying, our equipment is confused by your species' awful taste in sound design." "Precisely. Why me?" She looked at him, calm and deliberate. "Because you whisper honestly." He scratched his neck, blushing. "Still clinging to that, huh?" "It is not something to be ashamed of. That's where we differ." She pointed toward a console. "Sit. Listen. Tell me how it makes you feel." He obeyed, not sure if he was entering a science experiment or the strangest therapy session of his life. The sound began, a low oscillating tone that rose and fell like a breath underwater. It didn't hurt. It didn't even seem unnatural. It felt almost familiar, like nostalgia had been compressed into a single note. "Feels like the memory of missing something," he said, surprising even himself. Ayla blinked. "You described emotion using memory. Is that bad?" "It is human." She adjusted a dial, and the note changed, slightly brighter, less submerged. This one made Jewel think of sunlight through a window he hadn't seen in years. "You're analyzing us by sound?" "Sound reveals pattern. Emotion alters frequency. You, humans, are full of unpredictable vibrations. You think loudly, even when you say nothing." "Especially when we say nothing," Jules agreed. "Silence is where we panic the best." She smiled again, just barely. "I am learning." He watched her work for a moment. Her fingers moved like she was tuning an instrument instead of configuring alien tech. Her expression was focused, but never hard. There was a kind of softness to her seriousness, a curiosity without condescension. It made Jules feel like maybe she wasn't here just to study humans like microbes in a petri dish. Maybe she genuinely wanted to understand. The hum shifted again. This time the sound was higher, vibrating at the edge of comfort. Jules winced. Okay, that one feels like I disappointed my grandmother while being chased by a bureaucrat. Ayla tilted her head. I see. Guilt and anxiety. And a touch of financial dread, yes. She noted something on her tablet. He leaned forward. What do Nyari sound like to you? She blinked. I do not understand. I mean, if I'm hearing my feelings, what do you hear when you listen to other Nyari? She thought about it. Peace, unity, predictability. Our thoughts travel similar paths. Our emotions harmonize. And that's good? It is safe. Jules nodded slowly. Safe sounds boring. Ayla looked up sharply. I mean, I get it, he added quickly. Safety's great, but unpredictability, chaos even, that's how we change, grow, invent coffee machines that insult us in 5 languages. She gave him a look that might have been confusion or fascination, or both. Then she said softly, You are unlike others. Because I whisper marriage proposals in the dark? Because you did not expect anything in return? Jules coughed. Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't daydream about a dramatic wedding scene on a floating platform above Saturn's rings. That is specific. Hey, you told me to be specific next time. She laughed again, this time not cautious or academic, just amused. It was short but real. Jules felt something warm settle in his chest. She turned back to the console. There is one final frequency I want you to hear. He nodded, put the headset on. The sound began. This one was different. It wasn't high or low. It wasn't sharp or soft. It felt like a question, like a door half open, like someone whispering your name in a language you didn't know but somehow recognized. When it ended, he sat back. Well, she asked. He thought about it, then said, That one felt like hope. Ayla stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, recorded his answer, and said quietly, That was my voice. Jules looked at her. She didn't look away. Somewhere nearby, Clarence dropped another bolt. Of course it was, Jules whispered, too quietly to hear himself. But she heard. Jules had once read that the Nyari didn't sleep the way humans did. They didn't dream in visuals or stories, but in harmonic pulses, restful cycles of internal resonance. He imagined their version of insomnia involved badly tuned background music and existentially frustrating vibrations, like being trapped in an elevator with an off-key violin. Humans, on the other hand, had dreams where they showed up to work without pants, forgot their mother's birthday, or married an alien diplomat in front of a crowd of laughing cyborgs. He woke that morning, or what passed for morning, on a station orbiting a gas giant, with a half-remembered dream involving Ayla, an exploding cake, and his mother asking if she was nice. It lingered with him in a fog of embarrassment and syrup. He rolled out of his bunk with the grace of a sea sponge and made coffee while arguing with the beverage dispenser. No, I said black, not bark. I don't want tree bark in it. That was one time for a science prank. Don't log that as a preference. Preference recorded, the dispenser chirped. Jules groaned and took the mug anyway. The scent was questionable, but he was too tired to fight. He made his way to Lab 3B, where resonance samples from the Nyari field studies were still being processed. The room shimmered with low light and ambient hums, and Ayla stood by a panel as if she hadn't moved since the previous day. Your coffee is singing, she said without turning. I told it to shut up. It wouldn't listen. You also look rumpled. I prefer emotionally textured. She finally turned to him. Her long ears, the only real alien aspect of her otherwise human-like appearance, twitched ever so slightly. She studied his expression for a moment, then handed him a data crystal. These are Nyari courtship frequencies. Jules stared at the crystal. You're just casually giving me alien mating songs now? It is part of the analysis, she replied evenly. I wish to understand how they are perceived by humans who whisper improbable requests in mess halls. He rubbed his forehead. Okay, yes, that happened. But I'm still not sure if I'm being studied or wooed. She tilted her head. Would you object to either? He opened his mouth, paused, and blinked. That's not a fair question before caffeine. She didn't smile exactly, but there was a glimmer of something like amusement in her eyes. The sound tests that day were interesting. Jules listened to frequencies that made his spine tingle, his toes curl, and once, for reasons unknown, made him crave fermented squash. One sound made him laugh so abruptly he startled a technician in the next room. It was like being tickled in the brain by a mischievous algorithm. That one, he said, pointing at the waveform, feels like the first time you realize you have a crush and instantly regret existing. Crush, Ayla repeated, sampling the word like it might bite her. Such a destructive term for something affectionate. You should see what we do with the word ghosted. I did. It was alarming. Jewel chuckled. You really studying all of human romance or just mine? She looked at him. Quiet, intent. Yours offers anomalies. I can't tell if that's an insult or the beginning of a very weird compliment. Nyari do not flirt. We express intent with frequency, with clarity. Yeah, well, we humans express interest by tripping over our words and making terrible jokes, which you excel at. He blinked. I think I just got hit on. No, she said. You were acknowledged. He sat back, dazed. That's somehow more intimate. Their session was interrupted when Commander Harrow pinged him with a system alert. Something about unstable power fluctuations in the hydroponics ring. Jules excused himself with a promise to return, and Ayla simply nodded, already back in her calibration matrix like she was part of the machine. In hydroponics, the lighting was dimmer than normal, and a few containment bulbs flickered as Jules inspected the relay conduits. One of the engineers, Mari, leaned over and asked, So, is it true? Is what true? He asked, already wary. That you and the Nyari ambassador are a thing now? She walked through the medical wing yesterday and asked someone what wedding registries are. Jules nearly dropped his diagnostic scanner. What? No, that's taken wildly out of context. Mari grinned. Relax. I think it's cute. You're like a shy toaster and she's an intergalactic harp. It makes sense somehow. Thanks, he muttered. I think. He spent the next hour trying not to think about how many people on the station had already decided he was betrothed to a long-eared alien with a deep understanding of frequency-based love ballads. When he returned to Lab 3B, Ayla greeted him not with words, but by playing a new sound file. He sat down curious. The sound was soft, layered, strange. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. There was a note of tension, but not fear. Anticipation. A hum that felt like reaching out a hand without knowing if it would be held. Did you make this? He asked. Yes. What is it? My attempt to replicate what I hear when you are near. Jules opened his mouth, closed it, and slowly set down his now silent coffee mug. I'm going to need a minute, he said. Ayla waited. She didn't press. She didn't tease. She just stood there, letting the sound fill the room between them. Finally, he said, You hear more than I say, and I say a lot of dumb things. I hear what you feel, she said, and what you hide. And you're not running for the airlock? No. He looked at her, long and full of quiet wonder. Ayla, what happens if we keep talking like this? Keep listening? Her ears twitched again. Perhaps you stop whispering. Perhaps I begin to. He smiled. Maybe we meet in the middle. Like harmonics, she replied. Like a duet. She nodded once, solemn and musical. Then let us continue. Jules had always believed that science, real science, wasn't a sudden burst of epiphany under dramatic lighting, but a slow slog through misaligned data, passive-aggressive lab notes, and a lot of accidentally spilled coffee. So when he found himself sitting across from Ayla in the acoustic chamber, surrounded by Nyari resonators and human diagnostic gear duct-taped together in what looked suspiciously like a science fair project gone rogue, he knew this was the real deal. What exactly are we doing again? He asked, peering at the odd-looking coil wrapped around a grapefruit. We are constructing a cross-species empathic bridge, Ayla said without blinking. That's either a beautiful metaphor, Jules muttered, or a lawsuit waiting to happen. She gestured toward the headset resting beside him. This prototype will filter your brain's ambient emotional signals through a Nyari converter. In theory, I should be able to hear your intentions. Clearly. You want to plug my feelings into an alien musical decoder and listen to them like a playlist? Precisely. Well, if you hear any ska, that's not me. That's from college. I've grown since then. She didn't laugh this time. She just gave him a look that said she was either growing fond of his antics or developing the Nyari equivalent of clinical patience. Either way, he placed the headset on with a sigh. Okay, if I start convulsing, do I get a snack afterward? You will not convulse. Just checking. The machine hummed to life. Jules felt a tingle against his scalp, like static before a storm. Lights danced across the chamber wall, and the Nyari converter began to vibrate. Soft, harmonic pulses that somehow felt familiar. Ayla sat across from him, her expression calm, analytical, but her eyes were locked on him, focused in a way that made him very aware of his heartbeat and the fact that he had not brushed his hair today. What do you feel? She asked. Jules tried to focus. I feel awkward, a little warm, like I'm about to accidentally say something dumb. The harmonics shifted, slightly higher, a note of amusement. You are not dumb, she said. See, it's comments like that that make me suspicious this machine's reading into me too well. Now think of something honest. He paused. He closed his eyes. He thought of her walking into the mess hall that first time, ears catching the soft light, her voice lilting like liquid metal, her curiosity sharp and bright. He thought of the odd comfort she brought, the way she made the sterile edges of the station feel warmer. He thought of her laugh, small and unexpected, and the way she didn't flinch at his weirdness. The resonators flared, casting soft green pulses around the room. Ayla's eyes widened just slightly. What is that note? She asked softly. Jules opened his eyes and looked at her. That's me wondering if I can kiss someone who's technically part of a diplomatic delegation. Ayla blinked slowly. That is not forbidden. It's not exactly encouraged either, is it? She tilted her head, ears twitching. We do not encourage or discourage affection. We simply receive it. You make it sound like male. She stood, walked slowly around the table, and stopped beside him. He looked up at her, heart pounding just a little harder. She leaned in, just enough, and placed a cool hand on the headset to power it down. The lights dimmed. The room was quiet. You should rest, she said. The process is tiring for your kind. You say that like you're planning another round tomorrow. I am. He stood, legs a little wobbly. I'll try not to dream about harp music and interspecies paperwork. I recommend dreaming of rivers. That, oddly specific. Rivers are the metaphor we use when something is moving forward, slowly and powerfully. He smiled. Then I'll try to be a current. Don't be too fast. Currents that rush often spill. They parted with a nod, something strange and warm in the space between them. Later that evening, Jules returned to his bunk and found a sealed packet on his terminal. Inside was a data file labeled in both Nyari and English, Human Affection, a Study in Progress. It contained a single audio recording. When he played it, he heard a soft harmonic vibration, a single note. It wasn't music in the traditional sense, but it made his chest tighten and his throat go dry. It was what longing might sound like if it had grown tired of pretending it was anything else. He played it 3 times before he whispered, Okay, I hear you. The walls didn't answer, but somewhere far down the corridor, a familiar harmonic pulse responded faintly in the air, and Jules realized something quite dangerous. He wasn't just part of an experiment anymore. He was in it. Heart first, headset second. Jules stood inside the central arboretum of the station, holding a diagnostic scanner and pretending he was doing something productive. The truth was, he'd scanned the same water filtration panel 3 times and kept forgetting to log the results. It wasn't the filter's fault. It was doing a solid job keeping the hydro ivy alive. It was Jules's brain that was misfiring, tangled in frequencies and feelings, and one very tall, very composed alien woman who'd sent him a sound file that all but said, I like you. Please interpret that through a language made of tone, poetry, and soft vibration. It didn't help that everyone in the station now had a theory. One technician claimed Ayla had requested the human tradition of hand-holding explained to her in 30 different idioms. Someone else swore she asked if marriage required legal documentation or if an exchange of frequency was binding enough. Jewel wasn't sure what was more mortifying, that it was spreading like gossip or that he hadn't exactly denied any of it. Ayla appeared beside him so quietly he jumped and knocked the scanner against his knee. "You are injured," she observed. "Nope, just startled, and possibly bruised, and confused, and undercaffeinated." She handed him a packet of something green and faintly steaming. What is this?" "A Nayari calming infusion. It lowers adrenaline and stabilizes harmonic dissonance." "I see. So Nayari chamomile?" "With traces of something similar to saffron and trace metals." "Okay, that last bit sounds mildly poisonous." "Only mildly." He took a careful sip. The taste was like mint had made a secret pact with moss, but weirdly pleasant. Or maybe he was just too far gone to care. They walked together through the arboretum, under artificial light simulating a Martian dusk. The trees here were genetically engineered to sway even when there was no breeze, creating a soft rustling that sounded vaguely like applause if you were feeling insecure. "I've been thinking," Jules said, more to the rustling than to Ayla, "about what happens after this. You know, once the delegation ends and the station rotations switch again." "You're concerned about departure?" "Well, yes, I mean, not that I assumed anything would, happen. Just that, I don't know. I guess I thought maybe this connection, this weird but somehow comfortable resonance between us, had a shelf life." Ayla didn't respond right away. Her ears shifted slightly. A gesture he'd learned meant deep processing. Nyari didn't interrupt. They let silence be a partner in the conversation, not an awkward wall. Finally, she said, "We are not constrained by the same sense of proximity. Distance does not break a tone. It simply alters its echo." That's poetic and very Nyari, but humans aren't so great with echo-based affection. We tend to need proximity, shared breakfasts, accidental shoulder bumps, inside jokes about terrible coffee machines. She tilted her head. "Then we must explore those conditions." "You mean, test them?" "Yes, a controlled field experiment in shared cohabitation parameters. Temporary, of course, until your station rotation." "Are you asking to move into my quarters?" "I am suggesting we create an immersive environment for long-form emotional data collection." He blinked. "You're really making science the third wheel here. It is only the translator." Jules stared at the synthetic sunrise above the treetops. "You realize if we cohabitate, even temporarily, people are going to lose their minds. Let them. I wish only to understand this thing between us." He looked at her. Her expression was open, steady, not an ounce of embarrassment in her posture. Just certainty. It terrified and thrilled him at once. "Okay," he said. "We'll try it. But fair warning, I talk in my sleep, and I once kicked a wall dreaming I was a kangaroo. I will document all findings. Please don't." Their cohabitation began with a complete rearrangement of his quarters. Ayla insisted on reorganizing the ambient lighting to simulate Nayari rest cycles, which meant the ceiling glowed pale silver and the walls emitted soft background tones, like a whale having polite thoughts. Jules adjusted by wearing an eye mask and falling asleep to the gentle sound of her calibrating instruments. They didn't sleep in the same bed. Nyari didn't exactly sleep lying down, but they did share space. He learned that she hummed unconsciously when deep in thought, that she didn't understand why anyone would wear mismatched socks, but was fascinated by the concept of foot warmth, and that she absolutely could not eat popcorn. "It has hostile texture," she said, spitting a kernel into a napkin. "You just haven't met the right butter blend," Jules argued. "I believe butter should not feel like it is challenging me." Living together turned out to be comfortable, quiet, often, and filled with little unspoken rhythms. She cleaned up his tools without asking. He left silly notes on her research console. They didn't label what was happening between them, didn't push it into a human category or a Nayari protocol. It was simply unfolding. One night after a particularly intense session of harmonic mapping in the lab, Jules found her standing on the observation deck, staring out at the endless violet swirl of the gas giant below. "Do you miss your world?" he asked, stepping up beside her. "I do not miss places. I miss people. And some harmonies are unrepeatable once the instruments separate." He nodded slowly. "And this, you and me, is it one of those?" She turned to him. "Not if we continue tuning together." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. "I think I've stopped whispering," he said, her fingers curled around his. "And I think I've started," she replied. They stood in silence after that, the resonance between them not measured in frequencies or waveforms, but in the quiet, invisible pulse of something new and entirely theirs. Jules found himself in the strangest situation of his life, which, considering he once accidentally reverse jettisoned a sanitation pod into his supervisor's shuttle, was saying something. He was now cohabiting with an alien woman who organized her socks by wavelength and had no idea why humans found toast comforting. They were sort of maybe emotionally entangled, partially telepathic, and also still technically part of a scientific delegation that prohibited romantic entanglements resulting in diplomatic paradox. Jules wasn't entirely sure what a diplomatic paradox was, but he was pretty sure it involved brunch invitations and awkward explanations to Ayla's planetary elders. "You left the harmonic converter on again," she said without looking up from the console, her long fingers dancing across the interface as symbols he could only describe as aggressively elegant blinked in sequence. "I thought it was a humidifier. It is currently broadcasting your sleep patterns across the Nairi comnet." Jules froze mid-sip of his recycled coffee. "So someone on your homeworld is listening to me snore?" "Yes, and your dream state included a segment where you repeatedly said the word pancake in what can only be described as a mating tone." He nearly choked. "Look, pancakes are deeply emotional food for us, okay? Then perhaps do not whisper sweet nothings about syrup into galactic channels." Despite the embarrassment, he found himself grinning. Living with Ayla was like cohabiting with a very elegant alien cat who sometimes recited physics poetry and sometimes forgot that clothing was a social construct among humans. He'd had to invent a new hand signal just to remind her to wear a robe when walking into common areas. The current problem, however, wasn't wardrobe-related. It was diplomatic. A high-ranking Nyari observer had arrived on the station, a pale, solemn figure named Haranai, who radiated authority in the way black holes radiated existential doom. She had requested a full report on Ayla's cross-species integration experiment, which Jules quickly realized was code for "what the hell are you doing living with a human who can't even properly operate a coffee machine?" "We must prepare a demonstration," Ayla said that evening, her voice unusually clipped as she restructured the lab interface. "Of what?" Jules asked. "Our compatibility?" "Because I think I left socks in the hydroponics bay again." "Of emotional resonance," she replied. Jules rubbed his temples. "You want to demonstrate that we vibe?" "In scientific terms, yes." "And how do you scientifically demonstrate vibe?" "With a resonance alignment." He blinked. "Is that the Nayari equivalent of a duet?" She tilted her head, considering. "Possibly, but also more like synchronized meditation using harmonic translation fields and biometric symphony loops." He stared. "You just made science sound like jazz." "It often is." The next day, the lab was transformed into what Jules could only describe as a cosmic sound bath. Arrays of Nairi harmonic spheres hovered in the air, pulsing with soft color. A human neural scanner had been jury-rigged into the setup using approximately 40% too much duct tape and an uncomfortable number of exposed wires. Haranai stood in the center of it all, her long silver robe faintly shimmering, her expression like someone who'd been asked to approve a relationship between a diplomat and a salad fork. Ayla took her position on one side of the room, Jules on the other. The machine thrummed to life. "Clear your thoughts," Ayla instructed. "Project a single emotional signal." "What kind of signal?" he whispered. "Truth," she replied, "and no breakfast metaphors." He closed his eyes. He tried to think past his panic, past his insecurity, past the very real fear that he was about to get someone important disbarred from planetary negotiations. Instead, he thought of her voice when she asked if laughter meant acceptance. He thought of the way she stood too still when she was uncertain, and how her eyes softened just slightly when he rambled about his work. The spheres around them began to pulse, slowly at first, then more rapidly, synchronizing into a pattern so distinct even Haranai's brow rose a fraction of an inch. Ayla was broadcasting now, too, her emotions folding into the pattern like threads into a braid. The room vibrated. The instruments lit in a hue not cataloged in any human system. It wasn't just a color, it was a feeling. Warmth, curiosity, acceptance, affection. The machine gave a gentle ding. Jules blinked. Was that a successful ding? Ayla turned to Haranai. You see the results. Haranai paused for a moment, then spoke with the gravity of someone revealing the fate of a solar treaty. There is precedent, she said. Jules frowned. Precedent for what? Scientists falling in love during lab simulations? For interspecies harmonic fusion trials resulting in attachment. He stared. Wait, you mean this has happened before? Twice. Ayla nodded. In the last 2,000 years. So I'm basically a rare alien boyfriend. You are a statistically interesting anomaly. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Haranai folded her arms. The council will need documentation. Jules smirked. You want photos or just audio of me whispering about pancakes? Haranai walked away without answering. Later that evening, back in their shared quarters, Jules leaned back on the bed and sighed. That went better than I thought. I mean, no one got vaporized. Ayla sat beside him, her long ears angled forward in what he now recognized as quiet amusement. You were nervous. I always am. It's part of my charm. I like your anomalies, she said softly. He turned to her. Do you think this, whatever this is, has a future? She considered. I think we have begun tuning a resonance that cannot be easily undone. Even if I keep saying dumb things, especially if, he smiled. Then he reached over and tapped her hand. In that case, prepare for years of intergalactic nonsense. I am prepared. And for the first time, Jules didn't feel like he was just part of someone else's experiment. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Even if that place came with strange drinks, harmonic meditation, and very confusing rules about socks. The station's rotation cycle slowed, as it always did near a shift in delegation, the artificial gravity humming with a lazy rhythm. The corridors felt quieter now, not because there were fewer people, but because there was a kind of hush that came when something meaningful approached its end, or perhaps its next beginning. Jules stood in the observation dome, arms folded, watching the slow swirl of the gas giant below. The colors reminded him of fruit he hadn't tasted and emotions he hadn't named before all this began. Behind him, he heard the soft chime of the pressure door sliding open. No one else walked quite as silently as Ayla, which he'd once joked made her a prime candidate for ghost reconnaissance on derelict ships. She hadn't understood the joke then, but later gifted him a ghost detector made from a broken gravimeter and said she'd programmed it to beep only when he was being ridiculous. You haven't packed, she said. I've been procrastinating. It's part of my process. Step 1, delay. Step 2, panic. Step 3, put everything in a box and pretend I know what I'm doing. You could remain, she said simply. Jules turned to face her. What, like apply for an extended station assignment? Do what? Recalibrate the same panels again and again until I turn into one of those guys who talks to the vending machine like it's a pet? I meant remain with me. His heart did something unprofessional in his chest. She stepped closer. The Nyari Council has reviewed our resonance logs. They found no legal obstruction to a human integration, provided cultural alignment remains respectful. That's a very elegant way to say we're not breaking any galactic laws by dating. Correct. Although one elder suggested a traditional bonding melody. Let me guess. It involves flutes, symbolic feathers, and possibly a psychic feedback loop? Ayla tilted her head. You've been reading the cultural databanks. Only the parts that mention courtship rituals and food. There was silence for a moment, the kind that hung in a space like this, between planets, between decisions, between people who were slowly learning that silence didn't mean absence. You've changed, she said. Jules blinked. Should I be worried? Not alarmed, only observed. You are still chaotic in the morning and regularly misplace your shoes, but you are quieter in your center. You do not apologize for existing now. Jules didn't have a quick joke for that, which was saying something. I think, he said slowly, it's because for the first time, I feel like I belong somewhere that wasn't built for me. And instead of pretending I fit, I just do. Ayla reached for his hand, which she had grown more comfortable doing in private. Her fingers were long and cool, with a pulse that hummed faintly beneath the surface, like a melody still being written. You could come to Nyara with me, he exhaled. And do what? Become the first human ambassador of emotional chaos? Possibly, or simply live, share space, learn new harmonics, explain why toast matters so much. He grinned. I can definitely do the toast part. Later, when he did begin packing, really packing this time, he found the process less grim than he expected. He didn't need to take everything. He didn't need to hoard comforts or carry symbols of the life he was leaving, because he wasn't losing anything. He was bringing it with him in a way. Ayla's world wasn't the kind you packed for. It was the kind you stepped into, cautiously but completely, the way one might step into cold water just to see if they could swim. The other scientists on the station took it surprisingly well. There were a few awkward jokes, a few raised eyebrows, and a very questionable farewell cake that included both human frosting and Nyari nutrient paste. Jules ate it anyway. Haranai, the stern Nyari observer, offered him a curt nod as they boarded the diplomatic cruiser. Do not embarrass us, she said. Ma'am, I've been embarrassing since birth. She sighed, almost affectionately, or maybe just with resignation. Then at least do so competently. The journey to Nyar took 3 days through the sublight corridor. During that time, Jules learned 3 things. First, Nyari sleep pods were surprisingly comfortable once you got used to the humming. Second, Ayla's version of casual clothing looked like she'd robbed a high-concept sculpture exhibit. And third, he had never in his life eaten so much food that wiggled before he did. But it was beautiful. Nyara itself orbited a blue dwarf star, its atmosphere shimmering like glass dust. The capital was a vertical bloom of living towers that sang during dusk. Literally sang. Each building had integrated resonance panels that turned solar heat into choral tones. Ayla's home was high up, a circular space filled with translucent furniture and walls that shifted opacity based on mood. Jules got lost twice and apologized to a potted plant, which turned out to be a minor religious symbol. They adapted. He started working at the Planetary Research Center, mostly on translation protocols and understanding Nyari sonic code. His human hearing wasn't perfect for it, but he had patience and humor. He became surprisingly popular among the younger researchers, mostly for his habit of slipping human idioms into formal presentations. One day, Ayla stood at the edge of their shared dwelling, staring out over the city while holding a small harmonic crystal in her hands. You never really stopped whispering, she said. Maybe, Jules replied, but now you're whispering back. She turned to him, long ears catching the light, eyes steady and warm. Are you content? I'm more than that. I'm whole. And I didn't even know I was missing pieces before I met you. They didn't need a ceremony, though one was offered. They didn't need a contract, though one was written, mostly by overly enthusiastic Nyari scholars. They had what mattered, a shared space, a shared rhythm, and the ongoing, often ridiculous, always genuine effort to understand each other's species and selves. Jules whispered again, one night while half asleep. She's so beautiful. I wonder if she'd marry me. Ayla, already beside him, whispered back. I already have. And in a quiet room on a world full of song, the last echoes of old loneliness faded, replaced by something brighter, softer, and improbably real.